Hello everybody, and welcome to our Ideas CTR seminar. And we're very pleased and proud to have Dr. Ken Bayles, the Vice Chancellor for Research here at UNMC, join us today. I've known Ken for quite a while, which I am very happy to be able to introduce him. And it's funny in our busy times here, and then with COVID and not seeing people, getting to know people can be hard. But fortunately, Ken and I were sitting next to each other on a speed train from Shanghai to Beijing. And despite its speed, we got, a good amount of time to chat to each other. And that was really great. So, Ken, it's born and raised and educated, through his PhD in Kansas. And then after that, he moved to the University of Maryland in Baltimore, a place that I love Baltimore. Anyway, you're not here to hear about me, where he was a faculty member. I did his postdoc there and moved to the University of Idaho as a faculty member. And then he was recruited here in 2005 in the Department of Pathology to direct and start, really, the Center for Staphylococcal Research, which has grown and involves a lot of people here, and it has earned national recognition, including lots of NIH funding, and more importantly, a lot of scientific findings for the benefit of all. His research focused and still focuses on biofilm development and cell death as it applies to bacteria, and then has grown, because of the infectious disease, to a lot of Department of Defense related activities, including countermeasures against possible weapons. And in this, he's really had a leadership role in building these relationships. And importantly, it's all for the defense, not the offense. And then his leadership, as exemplified by the center, has really led him to new heights, first as the associate vice chancellor for basic research here at UNMC, and then a few years ago became the head of creative activities and research development at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, which he did in conjunction with the job here, as well as his research lab. A little over a year ago, or is it 2 years now? Time passes. He became our vice chancellor of research. He gave up the UNO job, but he still does very active research in his lab, well respected in the research community as well as the administration, and has really helped keeping us move forward here at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. So enough from me. Ken, it's all yours.
Thanks, Howard. That was a very nice introduction. And actually, I was going to cover some of that because I think it's important to kind of know a little bit about my journey when I'm talking about advancing ambitious goals in an era of fiscal constraint, because that's what I've been doing, I think, my whole career. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, good. And I'm going to move things around a bit. Okay. All right. So my plan today, I don't know, what you're used to hearing about, but this is going to be maybe a little bit of a different talk. And I apologize to those of you that maybe listened to me when I was applying for the VCR role, because I touched on some of these things before. So apologies. It's a little bit redundant. There's a little bit different spin on it now. But I want to give you the context is important. I want to tell you a bit about my own journey, and I draw obviously a lot from that when I think about building ambitious goals, and also I'm going to talk a little bit about our institution here, and because that's important too. So just as a review, we are a relatively small to medium-sized institution here at UNMC. We are the size of which we can't do it all. So we have focus areas like most places, I suppose. And these are, you've all seen these before. We have strengths in a lot of different areas in the big areas. And and we have and we don't emphasize some other areas just out of necessity. We just really need to focus, and I think that's really important if we want to really make a name for ourselves. We need to uh, put our limited resources in areas that we feel we can excel. And so out of all the investigators we have, which we have 523 PIs on campus, there are 1,485 active research projects. There's 40 different departments with graduate students. You've all seen this before. We've been growing over the years. Total sponsored awards surpassed $250 million last year, and about 173 million in research-specific awards. So this delta here is a reflection of the contracts that we've had, and you see a big gap here in the last several years because essentially because of COVID and the work and the contracts that were generated because of the work of the Global Center for Health Security, which I'm going to talk about. If you look at research expenditures, you can see that those follow as well. They're surpassing 200 million. I'm very proud of our research cores. I think we have some fantastic cores. We have 30 plus cores. They're sort of defined in different ways, so it's hard to get an exact number sometimes. You'll see different numbers. And we have, as you all know, beautiful research buildings. We have a wonderful philanthropic community who's contributed to our campus, and they're still contributing to our campus. And we have 10 world-class research buildings that have over 250,000 square feet of research space. A little more about our core facilities. I'm just kind of hitting the highlights, so I'll leave out some of those that may be near and dear to your heart, but we have great genomics, bioinformatics cores, preclinical imaging, BSL-3 cores. We've really spent a lot of time developing our BSL-3 capabilities to complement the work we do on the clinical side, advanced microscopy, genome engineering. So these cores, I feel strongly, these are the tools that we need to do our cutting edge research. So we definitely need to use our dollars to recruit outstanding faculty, but if we don't have outstanding cores to support our faculty's research, then it's that investment in the faculty recruitment is kind of wasted. So you're going to see a lot more emphasis on core development, especially as you heard about a couple of months ago, sort of reimagining the proteomics and metabolomics cores run by Rebecca Gundry now. We've had an explosion in the number of training grants. Howard is very familiar with this. I think we have 5 or 6 T32s now, which is just fantastic, sort of a reflection of the progress we're making in research. Okay, and I also wanted to give you a little bit about me because, I think that it's important at least it's important for me to convey to you that I feel like, and I don't know quite how to say this, but, I didn't really have a remarkable career path. I started in a small town in Hutchinson, Kansas, where I grew up watching basketball. It's the home of the Hutchinson Community or the Community College National Basketball Tournament. So I was very familiar with, it was called a junior college back then, Hutch JUCO, and I ended up going there. I was there for 2 years, got my AA degree in biology, and I had a very good, I remember fondly some of the instructors that were there, especially in biology. And then I went on because essentially my whole family were graduates of Kansas State University. My grandparents lived in Manhattan, Kansas. I was just going to Kansas State University. I didn't really have a plan. I knew that I wanted to be a biologist, and I figured, I would stay and go in the biology program at Kansas State University. I was actually going to be a marine biologist. That didn't work out. I made progress in that area, but live in the middle of Kansas, Kansas State University didn't have the greatest marine biology program. I applied and got accepted to get into graduate school in marine biology, but during that time, like any good undergraduate should do, I was working in a lab to get some experience, and it was a microbiology lab, and that just changed my perspective. And it wasn't so much microbiology as it was molecular biology and genetics that really turned me on. And I ended up having like this big career change, and it was difficult. My whole life I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I got turned on by molecular biology and genetics. And so I switched and I applied to get into graduate school at Kansas State University and ended up working in a lab who specialized in staphylococcal genetics. And I'm still working on staph today. We still haven't figured it out. So yeah, that was back in 1989, a long time ago, 4 decades working with Staph aureus. I just realized it just doesn't seem like it was that long. And then I went on to do a postdoctoral fellow. Again, I knew that I was supposed to, sort of switch things up and work on something else to broaden my perspective on science. But I had more questions about Staph aureus that I wanted to address, and so I ended up working in a lab by the name of Ron Yasmin was the PI of that lab. He actually was a Bacillus subtilis guy, but I continued my work on Staph aureus in the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And then I sort of worked my way up the ranks there as a postdoc, and then I became a research assistant professor, and I ran his lab, and I got grants and things like that, which is reflected there. And then I embarked on my journey into my first quote unquote real job. And that was at the University of Idaho, where I, completely opposite end of the spectrum. I went from a big city, Baltimore, to out in the middle of a wheat field in Moscow, Idaho, in 1996. I was there for 9 years. I was promoted. And then UNMC came calling, and I never really imagined going back to the Midwest. We had great friends in Idaho. I really wasn't looking to move, but then, like I think a lot of people do when they come to Omaha and to UNMC, they're oftentimes blown away, and I was blown away, just like them. And so I accepted a position and ended up getting promoted to full professor in 2007. And then, during this time is when I ventured into the unknown. And I remembered, I don't know the exact date, but I remember distinctly saying, I will never do that. I will never become an administrator. That is for somebody else. And so I guess never say never. In 2007, shortly after I came here, I became the vice chair for research. Steve Hendricks gave me that position, and then after a bit of success with Staph aureus, with big grants and things like that, I guess that got noticed, and Jennifer Larson gave me a call and asked if I would help her on the basic science side of things as the associate vice chancellor. And then, as Howard indicated, I spent some time at UNO, 4 years there. It was a very valuable experience for me to see how an undergraduate focused institution worked and the research enterprise there, and that was enlightening. And then that really gave me the experience that I needed to then become the vice chancellor for research almost 2 years ago now, Howard. It's flown by pretty fast. And so here we are today. Along the way, honestly, I started making stuff up in terms of my own positions. I mean, these are things that we just concocted, and this is kind of the theme in building programs and leadership. Is oftentimes you will recognize what you think is needed, and you just have to do it. You have to dive into these unknown areas and give yourself a fancy title and create a center and off you go. So that's what happened in 2009. Actually, what really happened was we had success with building a team, and we got a big program project grant, and we thought we've got to call ourselves something now. And we created this Center for Staphylococcal Research, which was approved by the Board of Regents, and I was the director of that. And then, fast forward to 2016, and I'm going to describe this in more detail, but recognizing some unique opportunities or assets of the university, in particular here, our UARC, we came up with this concept of the Nebraska Drug Discovery and Development Pipeline, the ND3P. And again, I'll talk more about that. I'm the co-director along with my partner over at UNL, Dave Berkowitz. And then in 2017, we came up with this crazy idea because of some of the work that we did in the biocontainment unit. I say we, it wasn't me, it was, the clinical side of things. Chris and I felt like we needed to encompass this in a entity called the Global Center for Health Security, which I stepped down when I went over to UNO, well, a little bit before that. So along the way, in terms of these three things that we stood up, there were a lot of lessons learned, and I'd like to share them with you today. And I guess, just building on, why did I talk about my own journey? What's remarkable about my CV is how unremarkable it is, right? I think that, I was the type of person that really didn't do that great on standardized testing, and my GPA was okay, but it wasn't enough to get, big major colleges knocking down my door to get me to apply to grad school and things like that. Frankly, it took me a while to get my first job at the University of Idaho. It took about 3 years before people had the confidence in me to actually lead their own research program. But then what I learned was that there's clearly something more to leadership than your CV, right? Your pedigree. And I mean, that certainly helps, no question about it. But there's something more than just being really good on exams and things like that. There's more to science. There's the creativity part and the imagination that's really hard to test. And that imagination and creativity sort of trickles over to leadership and building programs, imagining like what the gaps are in our infrastructure or in the United States or in the world, in terms of focus areas, and how you might fill those gaps. It takes a lot of innovation and creativity to think about that and imagining, well, if we built something like this, how could that benefit society? And so all that stuff that I'm talking about isn't easily measured. And so my point is, I don't know, I can't really see everybody who's out there, but it doesn't matter what your pedigree is. You can be thinking big. You can be thinking about leadership roles. Oftentimes, people, don't necessarily come to you and say, "We need you to build this." You just kind of have to do it yourself, and that to me is sort of the definition of a leader. Just figuring it out yourself and taking the initiative and having the guts to lead it because you believe in it. And so that's kind of why I told you my story about that. And I think that applies to anybody. The other thing that's important in terms of, well, skipped over this. So there's 3 different things I'm going to touch upon here that as I put this together, I realized that there were kind of three different leadership roles that I took that were a little bit different. So one was building a great team de novo, just out of nothing, and creating something. And then the second one is coordinating a team effort using existing resources. And I'm talking, when I say resources, I'm really talking about people, people that are banded together in a way that 2 + 2 = 5. So, you know, if you think about like an academic institution, any academic institution, as individuals, we are incredibly siloed, right? We are like our own small businesses. So each of our labs are independent small businesses often. Of course, there's collaborations, but we're funded separately. And if you can somehow harness that talent and pull them together for a common goal, it's incredibly powerful. And we're just not, as academic institutions, we just tend not to think that way. And then the third thing that I realized that I've dealt with is taking an existing thing, a platform, and taking it to the next level. So we'll hit each of those. But it's important here, along the way, for any of those three to know about and consider and leverage the unique assets that we have that are here. And we have really unique assets here. We've got, number one, biocontainment unit. There were 3 in the country, right? And you'll hear the story about how we leveraged that into something bigger, the Global Center for Health Security. And they knocked it out of the park. I mean, compared to the other 2 biocontainment units in the country, there was one leader, and that was us. And I'm incredibly proud of that. We have IXL, a really unique, to me, it's like a shiny new, you know, instrument. You know, we have the latest technology. And oftentimes, I remember there was a guy by the name of Paul Dunman when I was here. He made himself the expert in microarray technology. And he had collaborators all over the world. So he had this system that UNMC invested in, and he used that to really make a huge name for himself. So I see IXL as kind of the same way. We've got this new brand, well, it's not all that new anymore, but it's like a new microarray, you know, machine that is unique and can be leveraged to make a name for ourselves. We've got things like these biologics production facility that's right on the other side of the wall from where I'm sitting right now. We've got the Nebraska Nanomedicine Production Plant. So these are unique capabilities. These are GMP type capabilities that are really unique. And I think a lot about them when I think about how we could really build something using and leveraging those resources. And then I throw in here, because I think it's really important, we have to think about this as our rural and remote setting. You know, in Nebraska, the breadbasket Midwest of America is often overlooked, right? And it's clear that they're overlooked. You go out in rural Nebraska and there's just not a whole lot of support for them in terms of healthcare. And, you know, it requires some really innovative thinking to really accommodate the needs of those people who live out there. And so I think a lot about that. And then finally, and maybe for me, most importantly, is the National Strategic Research Institute, or UARC that I mentioned, that is, you know, we're one of 15 in the country, and we're the only one that has a biomedical focus. If you haven't heard about NSRI and UARC, it's a sole source contracting vehicle. It allows us to secure funds from the federal government, from the DoD in particular, in a very easy way, in a rapid way. It's not just good for us, but it's good for them. Oftentimes the DoD has things they want done right away. And it's so bureaucratic historically to get funding, because oftentimes, especially if they're looking for external help, They'll have to go through this long BAA process. It takes over a year to get things funded. But with our UARC, they can just send money. If we can deliver what they need, they can send money right over to us, skipping that whole BAA process. And I'll talk about that as well, how we leverage that. So building something from nothing. So a great team has a clearly defined theme. And I'm thinking when I'm talking through these bullet points about how we developed our own team for our Center for Staphylococcal Research. Choose the team members carefully. Strive for synergy, not redundancy. Synergy is really important. Draw from a broad pool of talent. And strategic recruitment is key, and you just have to be patient. I think for me, when I came here, we already had the good team members. There was actually much more. The team that we ultimately came up with was a select few that I was able to draw from a broader pool. And it just became clear pretty quickly who would be good team members, who would provide that synergy, and compared to others that wouldn't. And even with that, we had a couple of gaps, and so we had to be a bit creative. We had to recruit, and that was Tammy Killian. So we were fortunate to I was fortunate enough to have met Tammy Killian a year prior to actually recruiting her here. And she was from Nebraska, and I knew that she kind of wanted to get back home. So we got lucky with her, and but we took the time to kind of figure out where our gaps were, and then we did a targeted recruitment, and it's critical. And fortunately, I had Steve Henricks and Dean Britigan. Well, back then, I'm not sure if it was you, Brad, but you guys were supportive. And then even with that, there was still a missing piece that I just couldn't find, and I couldn't recruit. And so, at least for our PO1 team, we went out and we just brought in a collaborator from the outside. His name is Alex Forswell. He was at University of Iowa back then. Now he's in Colorado. So then that was our team. And so that was the recipe, I believe, firmly for success with our program project grant. So until last year, we had never been denied funding from the PO1. This year is the first time we actually had to submit a resubmission application. So yeah, and that's our fourth cycle. So we've been really successful with that. And like I said, it's the team. I feel strongly that the team is what sold that program project grant. So yeah, we have a well-defined focus area, staph infections. Initially, we were more inclusive. We saw the pool, and then we whittled down that broad pool to the exclusive group that's now our PO1 funded team. Took advantage of team building initiatives like the collaboration initiative program that University of Nebraska manages. We did test runs of collaborative projects to see who would be good collaborators, and identified gaps in expertise and recruited into them. And then, as I mentioned, we found collaborators from other institutions. So it's sort of a mishmash of different things. Of course, the goal for us was to find everybody who was right here at UNMC. But that's always the goal. But if that doesn't happen, and you feel like you're missing something and you can't recruit them, then yeah, partner with institutions that are nearby. Okay, so then a bit about what we did with that team, right? I told you that we had success with the program project grant, and and then we thought, well, gosh, we're like a center. Let's become an official center. And we got that Board of Regents approval. And then I guess maybe because I'm so darn literal, when I think of a center, I think of center of the universe, not just a center that makes us as team members, center members better, but we're like Mecca, right? We are the place to do staphylococcal research. And so we generated resources that added value to the broader research community. And so we were very altruistic about that. I was fortunate enough to get a grant from the DoD. It was one of the last earmarks, actually, to generate a sequence-defined transposon mutant library that we disseminate for free all around the globe. I guess there's just hundreds and hundreds of copies of that library spread out across the planet now. That's Nebraska Transposon Mutant Library. And that really took us a long way. It really, people knew about the Center for Staphylococcal Research. And then over time, we realized that, well, we can give these people these mutant strains of staph, but they're missing some. They need some training to actually know what to do with them, to maybe move the mutations around or do complementation experiments. So out of that, we realized, well, we need to develop a workshop, a staphylococcal genetics and metabolism workshop. And in fact, next week is our workshop week. We have it every year, and we get people from all over the world come to learn staphylococcal genetics. And they call it staph camp. They have a blast. They have a great time. And I just feel so good about it because I know that the bonds they make. I mean, we've all been to summer camps, right? And we have these friends from long ago that we'll never forget. It's kind of the same deal, but these friends that they're making, these connections they're making, they're going to be able to develop and foster throughout their careers if they stay in the staphylococcal field. And so I feel really proud of that. It's not just teaching the next generation about staphylococcal genetics, but we're giving them a great experience. And so they do call it kind of a mecca, coming to the staph mecca in Omaha, Nebraska. Leading your field involves putting yourself out there, taking risks, and having a visible presence at conference, being an engaged member of the conversation at these conferences. And don't just sit in the back and be quiet. Get out there and participate. And I already mentioned being altruistic, we versus me. Oftentimes I do say that what we did, like generating this library, was altruistic because we give it away for free. But I can't guarantee this, but I'm pretty darn sure that has helped us with funding down the line, because when people see our program project grant application, they think about what we've done for the research community, and they want it to be successful. They want us to be successful, and it's much better to be that way than the opposite, right? And it's the mentality of a reviewer is interesting. You want them in a good mind frame. You want positive vibes when they're reading your grant application. I can guarantee you that. And taking a leadership role in the community and being altruistic goes a long way towards helping with that. And then marketing your capabilities. We're in a world now where just marketing is so important. I'm not sure we really do that all that well, but it is the Nebraska Transposon Mutant Library. It's things like that. And we put our name out there in a lot of different ways, and I think that's really important. Okay, so we leveraged the PO1, made the library. We also did an international conference on gram-positive pathogens. So we brought together people who have similar interests, not just in staph, but in gram-positive pathogens in general. So again, just nobody asked us to do this at all. We just stood it up and did it. And I remember the first time we had this conference, of course you're wondering, okay, who's going to show up? Will anybody show up? And they did. And it grew from, I think the initial one was close to 100. We've had over 200. We do it every other year. It's been going. We took a little hiatus during the pandemic, but it's still going, and it's still fairly popular. And same goes for the Essentials of Staphylococcal Genetics and Metabolism workshop. I didn't know who was going to show up. The first one was, I think, 15 people. And last year we had 30 people that came in and to learn all about staphylococcal genetics. So sometimes you have to take risks. Okay, so that one we just built out of thin air, right? The Center for Staphylococcal Research was just built out of thin air. We put it together, and there are payoffs. You could do that. The second one that I want to focus on is coordinating a team effort using existing resources or personnel, and this is where the pipeline comes in. So this one is established in 2017 as a multi-campus collaborative platform that encompasses all aspects of drug development. So, there's really not anything unique about University of Nebraska in terms of its prowess in drug development. I think there is now, but there wasn't. I think we're like most institutions, we've got people that do a lot of different things. And, there's a lot of people with interest in drug development. And when you think about it, if you think about what's present in a pharmaceutical company, they have expertise from start to finish with drug screens or target identification to toxicology work or PK/PD, efficacy studies, of course, animals. From start to finish, they have that expertise oftentimes. At least the bigger ones do. Well, so do we, right? We're in an academic institution like any other, that has a lot of expertise across the spectrum of drug development. But as I mentioned, we're all siloed. We're doing different things and not collaborating as much as we could. And the whole idea behind the ND3P was to bring us all together into a common mission. And then the other thing that really drove my thinking about that was we had this new UARC. And I said that new back in, I don't know, 2011, I think it was, when the UARC was stood up. I was there from the beginning, and some of you may remember some of the pitches we made about the UARC, and I think there were probably promises made. People thought they were going to get funding, and it was a dismal failure. And so we had this new capability, but we didn't really know how to use it. And then it dawned on us that, well, if we have this really easy way for the federal government to send us money, we better build something they want to buy, that they need. And so there's a lot of different things they need, and they go outside of their own laboratories for. And I don't know, it just dawned on me at some point that, well, they really need help with drug development, because a lot of what the federal government needs in terms of drug development are way different than what big pharma needs. Federal government wants to make drugs that they hope they never use, and they're just stored in the SNS, the Strategic National Stockpile, in the event that something bad happens, and they'll bring them out. So that's not a recipe for making a lot of money for big pharma. So the federal government labs do a lot of work in drug development, and they've got a lot of great compounds to do this or that, but they all get stuck at that valley of death because they can't get big pharma to buy into it and help them cross that finish line to the FDA. So that was our opportunity. And so we went to them saying, we're going to take our ND3P, I always call it a virtual pharmaceutical company, and we're going to tell the federal government that we can help you move your drugs forward. And, I'm a microbiologist. I was thinking antibiotics, because antibiotics are kind of in that same category. They're not as the big blockbuster drug profit makers anymore. So big pharma is getting away from that. But what happened was there was this laboratory called the Armed Forces Radiobiology Research Institute that saw what we were doing, and they thought we could help. And that is, sorry, I'm off here a little bit, but that is what led to several now contracts with the federal government. So their focus is on radiation countermeasures, drugs that will protect a soldier against radiological weapons of mass destruction, or nuclear fallout and things like that. And they had that problem. They had a lot of compounds that looked great in test animals, but they didn't get any interest by big pharma. So they leveraged the UARC. They gave us our first $10 million contract several years ago now. And they used our pipeline. And this is basically our virtual pharmaceutical company. We take every part of this, every part of this pipeline, from therapeutic concept through drug discovery to preclinical studies to clinical trials, we can help with. There are clearly gaps that I'm working to fill, but we have a lot of capabilities along here. And the beauty of NSRI is that where there are gaps, say in toxicity studies, we had the ability to sub to CROs and things like that to get it done. So it's one-stop shopping right here in the ND3P for the federal government. And so they bought into it. And the Defense Health Agency, which houses AFRI, asked us to help them develop their drugs to mitigate or protect against acute radiation syndrome. And if you ever saw the movie Chernobyl, you'll kind of know what they're interested in. Folks that are exposed. So I never knew about radiation exposure, or let alone drug development. But now I do. And, if you watch Chernobyl, you'll see those folks that were exposed to radiation, they have these skin burns, they have acute radiation syndrome. And that's what kills a person. It's not the cancer that develops later in life, usually. It's the acute radiation syndrome can kill within days. And this is what you can take a drug to protect you against. There's certainly, you reach a limit of radiation exposure that even, there's no drug that can protect you from that. But moderate doses of radiation exposure, you can protect against that. Think of the people that had to go into Fukushima to turn off the valves and things like that. They were exposed to high levels of radiation. Right now, there's really no radioprotectant that helps them. There's a lot of things in development, and that's what we're helping to do. And now we're at $45 million in funding so far with the federal government to activate our ND3P to make these radiation countermeasures. So there you go. I mean, you can take what we have available within our system and the assets that we have, leverage those assets, the UARC, and turn it into something massive that it now is like this fundamental asset for the federal government. They look to us to help them make radiation countermeasures, and there's a ton of interesting stories around that. I don't know that there's any bigger fan of the UARC than me, but if you're interested in learning more about the UARC, I'd be happy to sit down with you, because it's such a valuable resource that I think that we don't leverage enough. There's a lot of potential there that we could do with the UARC that is just not being tapped into. And then the third approach is taking an existing platform to the next level. So this is where the Global Center for Health Security comes in. This was a Board of Regents approved center back in 2017. I was there with Chris Cradaville and others pitching this center to the Board of Regents way back then. We had this idea about building a framework, essentially just to allow us to take a leadership role in the country, not only to develop and coordinate activities internally, but to be the face of what we're doing externally. And I think most of you know the result of that. This developed as a result of the work done during the Ebola outbreak, right? So we activated the biocontainment unit and got a lot of recognition out of that, and started making a name for ourselves then, our clinical folks, who I'm just so proud of. They rolled up their sleeves compared to the other two in Emory University, and I think the other was Bellevue, I think. and we just led. And I still marvel at that. And I wanted to harness that. And we created the Global Center for Health Security. And as you know, it played a high profile role during the pandemic. Like you saw them all the time on CNN and Fox News and all that kind of stuff. And so these next couple slides, I asked Chris Cradaville to send me a couple slides, and John Lowe actually is the director of the Global Center now. But one of the things in here, in one of their slide decks, is this one, this quote from Andrew Carnegie: "Teamwork is our ability to work together toward a common vision, the ability to direct individual accomplishments towards organizational objectives. And it is the only fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results." And it is so true. And I think this is our secret sauce here in the Midwest. I think we do this well. I don't know why exactly, but we've been doing it for centuries, right? Raising a barn, things like that. The community has come together and we're just willing to roll up our sleeves for the common good. We just do that well, and we can harness that more. That's what we have. Again, things that we can leverage to our advantage, our ability to work together. And so, as I mentioned, building on our history, our history with the biocontainment unit, this is something that was stood up in the early 2000s, took a lot of vision. I think Steve Hendricks was involved in a lot of that, and others. And they trained for years with nothing really happening, and it was quite an investment. And then finally Ebola happened, and we were ready, and we took a leadership role there, and you could see some of the things we got involved in: patient transport, and the Nebraska Ebola method is used throughout the globe now. And so this is just a mission statement, a global resource. Again, being altruistic, it's a resource, not just for us, but to lead the world. And that's what they've just really knocked it out of the park with. Clinical care and research and development, and certainly training and education. They come to us, they look to us to help train medical professions across the planet. It's really remarkable. And then, got some issues there. So then, just looking at the breadth of programs that have emerged under the Global Center for Health Security umbrella. The NETEC is this big ASPR-funded multi-million-dollar program that brings together expertise across the country to develop a coordinated response capability, not just in Nebraska, but across the country. We're the National Quarantine Unit. It's in IXL building. There's a 15-bed unit there that was activated when individuals from China in the early days of the pandemic from Wuhan needed a place to be quarantined. They came here and other places. There's the Training and Simulation Quarantine Center, TSQC. National Disaster Medical System. These are all major funded programs. C-STARS, these are the Air Force military coming to learn from us how to handle patients with highly infectious diseases. And then just basic guidance to the country, playbooks for the meatpacking industry, the court systems, higher ed, Big Ten, you see it here, all these different places where people gather for whatever reason. They have guidance from us to help limit the spread of disease. So I think this is my last slide. So this is, I hope so. So take-home messages here. I think it's critical that if you're thinking you might have some leadership potential, or you have an idea, identify your research focus area, or it doesn't necessarily even have to be research, but think about it, identify it early, and be patient. I mean, people are so impatient. These things oftentimes take time. Use that time to choose your team carefully. Identify the gaps, as I mentioned, and fill those with the resources that you have around you. And if they're not around you, then work with your dean or your chair and maybe try to, tell them your vision and say, you'd like to help recruiting somebody into that vision. Develop a strategy to enhance the value of your program to the broader research community. I talked quite a bit about that. I can't overemphasize that. That the value of that is really important. And then, this involves risk, right? You just can't be afraid to fail. Your ideas, they're not always going to work, but if you don't try, you're not ever going to really achieve the big goals that you are striving for. And then finally, don't wait for someone to ask you to do it. Take the initiative and just lead. That's the definition of leader. Just it's not going to just fall in your lap. Usually, sometimes it does, but you have to take the bull by the horns here and really take the initiative and be a leader. And then in this regard, I don't know, I left this book in here. It's a great book called Grit. This stuff takes time, and it's going to be successes and failures, but you got to work your way through it. And this book really focuses on that. The power of passion and perseverance. I just remember in my own journey how important that was. I'm relentless, I guess. I'm not brought down by failure because it happens all the time. It's the end goal that really drives me. And I know that it's not going to be a straight line upward path. It's going to be ups and downs. So this book really talks a lot about that. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and be happy to entertain any questions. And I took way longer than I ever imagined I would.
Well, you had a lot to say, and thank you, Ken. That was wonderful. I don't know if you see in the chat, there's no questions, but people that went to school near you. So, I mean, there must be something in the soil there.
Haven High, wow, and Hashjuka, very good.
Yeah, yeah. So why don't you? Okay, there's a bunch of thank yous. You can just go ahead and take a look at the chat. I think, or we can ask Sid to say it. But discover future plans. I like that. I mean, you could talk forever on your discoveries and contributions. So I would encourage people to just read his papers. And then if you could address that, and then Nathan has a question. So after you finish, Nathan, you can go ahead and so what are your future plans?
Well, so now I've been kind of given the green light to lead here, right? And now, gosh, I love thinking about this stuff, and it's great to have a platform to from which to really develop some of the ideas. And I love the idea of cross-campus collaboration, and lo and behold, we are in an era at the University of Nebraska where there is a lot of talk about combining resources and things like that. Well, I feel like I've been doing that for a while now, and there's so many other things that we could do. I mean, just think about the Global Center for Health Security, and then we have this wonderful Nebraska Center for Virology over in Lincoln, and there just wasn't enough synergy and communication between the two. They should have been talking the whole time, there are some things. There's some obvious things for me to work on, in my new role. So building a bigger program, leveraging the UARC more, getting the deans more engaged with the UARC, and maybe even recruiting into the UARC. We have this wonderful asset that gives them a huge leg up and an advantage for funding. What a recruitment tool that would be. And I don't know that we really use that enough. We've done it some, and we bring people in like Jared Evans and Josh Santarpia, who totally take advantage of the UARC. We recruited them in directly into the UARC, and they're raking in millions. They have very wonderful research programs. So yeah, there's a lot more, but I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Nathan.
Oh, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just trying to clap, but since you said.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But-
That's all.
While I'm on here, so what does the funding from the NSRI look like? I mean, I've heard it's not a grant, it's a contract. How does that come about?
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you asked that, because that's a common misperception, is that NSRI is loaded with funding and you apply to it and you get, they'll grant you money to do something. It doesn't work that way. They're basically a connector, and they will help you to get your project funded through them, because they have this sole source contracting capability. Now, if you have a project that you are interested in that you know has interest by the DoD, then you're probably going through the old-fashioned way, going through the BAA process or responding to that CDMRP process. And if you work with NSRI, they can match you up with a program officer and they can fund you directly. Now, the other thing about NSRI is that it gives you a seat at the table. So you kind of get to know what their interests are, what their needs are. So you can, if you have the ability, you can adapt your research to match their needs. And once you make that match, then that's where the magic happens. That's where you can get big contracts. So the NSRI is a connector, not a funder.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for Ken? Well, again, this is recorded if you want to rehear some of it, or I know Ken's quite responsive and happy to talk about research and planning and the future. So let me thank Ken once again and all of you for logging on and attending this seminar. And Chi-Chi, thank you for organizing everything. My job was easy here. So yeah.
Thank you. This
Almost
is
1
great.
o'clock.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Thanks
Ken.
again.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks, Ken.